Robert had a mistress. She was young and fresh, free in bed, and brought him experiences he'd never had before. He reminded her to take the pill. She flirted playfully with him, joking that she wanted to have his child. Robert warned her sternly that if she got pregnant, she'd have an abortion and he'd break up with her. He would only allow his wife to bear his child. It sounded quite affectionate. So, I told him, I'm pregnant. But he fell silent, because we hadn't had sex life in 5 years. I cheated. I thought hearing those words, Robert would calmly ask if I enjoyed myself. Instead, he frowned slightly, staring at me for a long time without speaking. Didn't believe me? Oh, right. I had lied to him 5 years ago. At the time, I was filled with hatred, but at the last moment, I came to my senses. Ruin myself just to get back at him? It wasn't worth it. So I pushed David, Robert's good friend, off the bed. But I still maliciously put marks on myself and told him I'd cheated, asking for a divorce. Robert's eyes welled up instantly. But that was all. The moment I learned about his affair, my usual composed demeanor shattered. Hyperventilating, I couldn't catch my breath, and my fingers curled stiffly like claws. I thought I was going to die. Robert calmly found a paper bag, helped me restore breathing, calmly explained, and calmly made promises. Sadie, we've been married for 5 years. I'm a normal man. Eating the same thing every day gets old. I'm under a lot of stress at work. Sometimes I want to release negative emotions, but you are my wife. I have to respect you. Besides sexual fidelity, I can give you everything you want. Looking at him through my tear-filled eyes, I desperately wanted to ask one thing. Do you still love me? But I didn't say a word. He had cheated. Whether he loved me or not no longer mattered. I washed my face and firmly insisted on divorce. Robert wasn't surprised. He advised me to calm down and think things through carefully. Yes, after I discovered his infidelity, he remained stable and composed, handling the situation with ease. Even after I slapped him with all my might, he still looked at me calmly, as if I were a child throwing a tantrum. When I raised my arm again, he caught it firmly. The vast difference in strength between men and women meant I couldn't break free. Instead, he held me tightly in his arms. The embrace that once brought me warmth now sent a chill to my bones. He tried to persuade me. My parents tried. Even my best friend tried. Yes, to outsiders, including my parents, I was no longer worthy of Robert at that time. Only because I had gotten in on the ground floor, accompanying him through the most difficult period of his startup. It was like a high-risk investment, and I had made out big. He achieved success, and I lived comfortably off his success. Divorcing now meant too much to lose and would only make me become a subject of gossip. Public opinion turns against you. At that time, I hesitated. To win me over, Robert truly put in a lot of effort. I was showered with gifts. Besides jewelry, he gave me a yacht and an island. The island was equipped with a pool villa and a butler. He even took half a month off specifically to accompany me on the yacht to vacation on the island. We watched the sunrise over the sea and tasted fresh, fatty tuna we'd just caught. We walked on the beach, admiring the magnificent sunset. His attitude towards me was even more considerate than when we first got together. I think I was starting to feel a little better. Until late at night. Robert had just showered, his warm body, still damp with steam, wrapped around me from behind. My mind involuntarily flashed back to the chat logs on his phone. The girl's playful sweet talk and life updates, which he never responded to, but when she asked him to choose lingerie styles, he replied. Even if it was just one word. A vice tightened around my heart. Do you kiss her when you sleep with her? I asked coldly, and Robert's hand on my waist stiffened. Pulling his hand away, I rushed into the bathroom. The exquisite and delicious dinner ended up as a sickening pool of vomit in the toilet. The trip that was supposed to last half a month ended after 2 days. Later, I became like a detective, stubbornly searching his clothes for any signs. There were no lipstick marks on his shirt, no perfume smell. Clean. I found nothing. But after he came home late again, the string that had been tightening snapped. After I threw a hysterical fit, he started to freeze me out. When I realized I was turning into a resentful woman, I panicked. Even more ironic, I discovered I was pregnant. This was supposed to be a huge surprise. I wanted a child, but I couldn't get pregnant. I went to the hospital for checkups. My body was fine, his body was fine, but it just wouldn't happen. IVF was brought up. I had dozens/hundreds of injections and suffered a lot. After finding out about his cheating, my mood was too bad, and I even had some bleeding in between, but I didn't pay attention. Unexpectedly, when this little life I had longed for finally arrived, I no longer felt anticipation. I didn't tell Robert and went to the hospital to have an abortion myself. But when I woke up, I felt empty and numb. That's when Robert appeared. His face was pale, his eyes full of disappointment. "Sadie, is this your revenge on me? But the child is innocent. That's why I couldn't let it come into this world. How pathetic for a child who can't live in love. Robert, let's get a divorce." I repeated the phrase numbly. No, no divorce. He was even more resolute than I was. 5 years passed. Now, we were like strangers. The woman beside Robert had also changed. I heard his new girlfriend was from a dance academy. The young girl was young and vibrant, and he must have liked her quite a bit, as he hadn't placed her in over half a year. The last time I saw him was a few days ago. It was melodramatic. A rear-ended on the highway, his car hit mine. He was probably planning to take the young girl to the beach. She was wearing a floral dress and a wide-brimmed straw hat. She didn't recognize me and apologized frantically as soon as she got out of the car. "Sister, I'm so sorry. It was my fault. I was feeding her boyfriend something distracted him in the car. He has a sensitive stomach and didn't have time to eat before leaving this morning." She was biting her cherry pink glossed lips, her fair skin with a healthy blush. She was young, vibrant, and captivatingly beautiful. "It's okay." I looked at Robert and smiled at him. "Next Thursday is our 10th anniversary. Let's have dinner together." Robert's gaze was calm, but the young girl's face instantly turned pale. She looked at me, then looked at him pleadingly, naturally clinging to him. Clinging to him. Robert subtly stepped away. "I'll drive you back." "No need. I have something to do. I won't delay your plans." Although the collision wasn't serious, the seat belt had pressed against my abdomen, and I was worried about any potential impact on the fetus. Getting back into my car, I was about to close the door when a man's hand held it open. A shadow fell over my head. "Sadie, don't you have anything you want to tell me?" Robert looked down at me, his eyes dark. "Tell you what?" My voice was mocking. "Did you want to see me go crazy and beat up the mistress?" I chuckled lightly. "Don't think of me as so childish. You gave me so much money, it's enough to buy your peace and quiet. All right, let's talk next week." Robert still held the door open, staring at me intently, his emotions hidden beneath the surface. I met his gaze calmly. He finally withdrew his hand. I stepped on the gas, got back on the road, turned the steering wheel, and changed lanes. Getting off the congested highway, the road ahead opened up. Couldn't get pregnant in 5 years of marriage with Robert? After changing the child's father, getting pregnant turned out to be such a simple thing. It seemed Robert and I were not meant to be, destined to take different paths in life. With my advance notice, Robert arrived early and brought a gift. A carefully selected ruby necklace. Top-grade pigeon's blood ruby. Even though we'd been separated for 5 years and rarely saw each other, his gifts to me never stopped, and he was generous. By worldly standards, I had made out quite well from this marriage. "Let's get a divorce." After telling him I'd cheated and was pregnant with another man's child, I presented the divorce agreement. I didn't want to drag things out, so I was very generous with the property settlement. However, upon hearing that I was willing to give up all my shares in his company, Robert asked expressionlessly, "The child is David's?" Before I could answer, he sneered. "You're divorcing me to marry him and have his child? And then what? Are you so sure David won't cheat?" I remained silent, and Robert's words grew sharper. "Do you really believe in playboy settling down stories? He's slept with way more women than me. Aren't you afraid of contracting a disease?" Unlike Robert, who was a self-made man, David was from a privileged background. A well-known playboy in the circle. Though charming but wild, he had sharp business acumen. He was Robert's earliest investor. They were similar in age and gradually developed from a business relationship into close friends. David used to address me by my name, Sarah, warmly when we met. I had my share of suitors before, so I knew he had a look in his eyes that wasn't entirely innocent. That's why I sought him out when I wanted revenge. Perhaps it was because he missed his chance, but David developed a persistent interest in me. The child wasn't David's, but I felt there was no need to explain to Robert. "Robert, you're not young anymore. Didn't you used to look forward to having a child? After we get a divorce?" I avoided his topic and gently advised him to consider his future. But Robert pressed his lips together, his gaze fixed on my belly. His gaze was dangerous, making my nerves instantly tighten. "Sadie, you will have this child for me." He spoke each word, cold as a knife. That year, Robert absolutely refused to divorce. He threatened and bribed my lawyer, preventing other lawyers in the industry from taking my case. Even using underhanded methods, he wanted to maintain our broken marriage. "Robert, I don't want to make this messy. If you don't agree, I'll have to contact the media. Can we end this amicably?" But he still wouldn't budge. A heavy sense of exhaustion washed over me. I raised my hand to rub my temples, and he suddenly grabbed my wrist, his voice hoarse. "Abort the child, and I'll agree to whatever you want. We won't get a divorce. From now on, we'll live a good life together." Robert desperately wanted to convince me how unwise it was to divorce and remarry. It was just jumping from one fire pit into another. Men inherently have a desire to conquer. When things become too stable, they seek novelty. Robert, seemingly concerned for my well-being, rationally analyzed men through his own lens. "Sadie, you're too idealistic about marriage." "Robert, do you still love me?" I still asked that meaningless question. Seeing that he couldn't convince me, the dark eyes of Robert, upon hearing this question, sparkled with a hint of light. He was a confident, even arrogant man. Of course, his abilities and charm were enough to support his confidence. So he firmly believed I still loved him, but this notion wavered when he learned of my pregnancy. "Yes." He stared at me intently. "Sadie, you are the only wife I recognize, my family." I wasn't too surprised by this answer. When he was in college, his parents died in a car accident. I accompanied him on the long train ride back to his hometown, stayed with him through the night at the funeral hall, and went with him to the police department to handle the household registration cancellation. From then on, he was the only one left in his household register. At that time, I held his hand and told him he still had me. From then on, I would be his family. Robert seemed calm at that time, with almost no trace of sadness on his face. But in the dead of night, he held me tightly, his movements far more intense than usual, again and again, tireless. When I fell asleep from exhaustion, I vaguely heard him whisper, "Sadie, I only have you." So many years had passed. He had countless followers. If he wanted, he would never be alone. "See, these years, you've done well without me." Just as Robert was about to speak, I cut him off. 5 years ago, do you remember a period when I disappeared? At that time, I was abroad. My phone turned off, out of touch, so Robert couldn't find me. Seeing how difficult he was being, I had no choice but to play the emotional card. I went abroad to treat a disease. I had cancer and almost died. I pulled down my collar and showed him the surgical scar. That child back then couldn't have been born anyway. A lump was found in my breast during the prenatal checkup. Robert's body trembled slightly, his voice strained. "Why didn't you tell me then? Call my husband down from another woman's bed to take care of me, severely ill? Long-term illness drains affection. I didn't want to see you look at me with disgust. I didn't want Robert to know, so I hid it from everyone. They thought I went abroad to relax, unaware that I had walked through the gates of hell alone." At that time, I felt broken. I went through the surgery in a daze, collapsing onto the hospital bed like an empty shell. Day after day, Robert was like the tumor removed from my body. It hurt terribly at first, but the wound slowly healed. I didn't die. And I successfully weaned myself off Robert. I no longer depended on him, becoming mature and independent, just as he had always wished. That day, I walked out of the hospital. The weather was sunny and pleasant, the roadside trees were lush and green, with birds singing and flowers fragrant. My doctor smiled and congratulated me. The cancer hadn't recurred in 5 years and could be considered clinically cured. Although my marriage was in ruins, I felt whole in a way I never had before. I believed I could do it. At 36, I was reborn. I love children. So having this child is really not easy for me. I stroked my belly, speaking earnestly. "Robert, let's part ways amicably." 6. I feel like I'll never understand men. When I thought Robert loved me dearly, he made me taste the agony of 1,000 arrows piercing my heart. When I thought things had come to this, he would surely accept my divorce request, yet he kept compromising. "Then have the child, I'll raise it as my own. Whatever you want, I'll give it to you." I sighed helplessly. "You know, the doctor said that the illness I had was mostly caused by long-term depression and anxiety. Emotions subtly affect the body. Those negative emotions don't just disappear, they transform into invisible attacks on the body." Robert's career was soaring. The gentle, humble young man I knew had changed without realizing it. He spent more and more time on work, and we communicated less and less. The way others looked at us also changed. Before, we were a perfect match, talented man and beautiful woman. Gradually, I no longer seemed to measure up to him. When we had disagreements, from where things should be placed in my career plans, it seemed I should always listen to him. If I didn't, I was just acting like a child. Once I argued with Robert, I felt like I was suddenly standing against everyone. Even when he cheated and I wanted a divorce, my own parents didn't understand me. In their eyes, Robert was such an accomplished and outstanding man, I should worship him. He had merely made a mistake every successful man makes. If I just learned to turn a blind eye, life could be incredibly comfortable, but I insisted on making a fuss. Furthermore, even though we hadn't had children after many years of marriage, he never blamed me. The conclusion was that I didn't appreciate how good I had it. I want happiness. Can you give me that? Predictably, upon hearing the word happiness, Robert again showed the look of helplessness one gives to a childish person. Of course. I smiled slightly. I also want to experience the kind of pleasure in bed that you enjoy, where your partner is attentive to my needs, and everything revolves around my feelings. Can you do that too? Robert narrowed his eyes, as if I was being unreasonable. Of course, provided I'm willing. He probably recalled that night on the island and said nothing. From then on, we never had sex life again. See? You can't even give me that. Why is it shameful for adult women to pursue physical pleasure like men do? Once a man has money and status, why do a woman's demands for equality, companionship, and fidelity, which are the most natural requirements in a marriage, become unreasonable? We ultimately parted ways on bad terms. What's going on with you and Robert? Why is he sending people to track me again? David called, asking leisurely. They hadn't explicitly fallen out face-to-face back then. Smiling outwardly while stabbing in the back. Even knowing that David and I hadn't actually slept together, Robert showed no sign of it on the surface, meticulously planned, and thoroughly screwed David over. David not only lost a large sum of money but also nearly ended up in prison. After that ordeal, instead of keeping his distance from me, he became even more attentive, persistently trying to steal me away. He kept this up for 5 years. David was the one who told me about Robert's new girlfriend. He was probably the person in the world who least wanted us to get back together. Well, probably because I'm pregnant, and he suspects the child's father is you. David was silent for 5 seconds. Whose? None of your business. Realizing my tone was sharp, I changed the subject. Can you help me find a divorce lawyer? No problem. Then, David asked in a low, cool voice. Sadie, I can help, but tell me who the father of the child is. I didn't understand why he, like Robert, was so insistent on finding out who the man was. But now that I needed his help, I had to be honest. It was IVF. The child was part of my plan. I thought confirmed I'd cheated would surely make him agree to a divorce. David blurted out. IVF? Why didn't you ask me to help? If I kicked the bucket, this child could inherit my estate. Maybe for the sake of good genes. I thought my wording was tactful, but David was clearly angered. He scoffed, mocking. Think I'm impure? How clean is your husband Robert then? Using the pretext of discussing lawyers, David knocked on my door with several bags full of supplements and baby supplies. See anything else you need? Your belly isn't big yet, but you never know what might happen. You should have someone around to take care of you. How about I have a cleaning lady, and I've hired a nanny and a postpartum nurse. David raised an eyebrow, teasing. Sadie, do you need to be so guarded around me? If I'd known you were a fortress, I wouldn't have been so gentlemanly and didn't sleep with you back then. David, we can't happen. He didn't take my bait, his gaze lightly falling on my abdomen. What if I became this child's stand-in dad? Then why would I go through all the trouble just to divorce Robert? I was about to kick him out when there was a knock at the door. Dong, 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 again and again. Even though there was a doorbell, he didn't use it. David and I exchanged a look, a playful smile on his lips. You don't think Robert came to catch us together, do you? Without waiting for my response, he walked to the door like he was the master of the house. Robert stood outside the door. Hey, buddy, long time no see. Compared to David's casual nonchalance, Robert was expressionless, his sharp gaze piercing through him like a needle, aimed directly at me. Sadie, we're not divorced yet. The child isn't his. I knew, given Robert's personality, he had to get an answer. The child's father is younger than both of you, healthy, no family history of genetic diseases, doesn't smoke or drink, no bad habits, high education. He understands me. With him, I feel comfortable and at ease. Meeting Robert's sharp gaze, I said seriously. He's really great. Robert said coldly. Great? Knowing you're a married woman who's had a serious illness, not caring about your health, coaxing you to have a child to trap you? Such morally corrupt, low-character gigolo wanting to be supported by a rich woman, is that great? Whether he's great or not isn't for you to judge. I can feel it myself. I retorted. You say you love me, but if I can't feel that love, is it really love? David chimed in slowly from the side. Robert, don't talk like you were so good to her. If you were, she wouldn't have tried to sleep with me to spite you back then. My foolish romantic notions combined with David fanning the flames, Robert left with a dark expression. But as soon as he left, David asked, Sadie, I somehow feel like this guy you're talking about is a real person. With David's help, a lawyer finally took my case. During the divorce proceedings, David suddenly brought me some helpful information. Robert's new girlfriend was pregnant. However, before we could figure out how to use this news, the girl went into the hospital. The child was gone. Although there was no evidence, it was very likely the accident was arranged by Robert again. This wasn't the first time a woman outside our marriage had gotten pregnant with his child. That year, when she heard I wanted a divorce, that woman secretly got pregnant, hoping to gain status through the child. Robert didn't hesitate to tell her to have an abortion, but she absolutely refused. Then, she had a car accident. Although she was injured, the fetus was unharmed, and the woman escaped from the hospital in the middle of the night. Robert used both legitimate and underworld channels to find her, searching everywhere. Who knows if Robert gave instructions, but when she was being pursued, the woman panicked and fell down the stairs. Her uterus was removed, and she almost died. It caused a big stir at the time, almost becoming a scandal, and he spent a lot of effort to suppress the news. So, at that time, he didn't have time to deal with me. He was afraid I would make a scene. Later, we grew estranged. Unexpectedly, back then he didn't want a child, and 5 years later, no longer young, he still didn't. The first time I met Robert, I knew he was a ruthless man, someone who would succeed. David couldn't help but sigh, and he came to a conclusion. Sadie, it seems he really only wants a child born to you, and he doesn't even care if it's his. Contradictory? He certainly seemed deeply affectionate towards me, yet it didn't prevent him from sleeping with other women. Well, then he might never have children in this lifetime. Hanging up the phone, I looked down and touched my already visibly protruding abdomen, my heart softening. Baby, will you come back to find mommy? The first court hearing. Robert hired a top lawyer, plus his prepared sincere speech. As expected, the judge did not grant the divorce. In the hallway, he stopped me. Sadie, I checked the hospital records. You lied to me again. I knew it. You don't like David. You haven't had any man in your life all these years. Compa. Read to our last meeting, Robert didn't look well, appearing very tired. Since the child is IVF, why didn't you use mine? The hospital clearly still stored my sperm. What do you think? I asked faintly. Of course, it's because I didn't want to. The atmosphere froze. I turned and walked away, supporting my belly. 11, should be 12 or later, based on original numbering. Before the second court hearing, I gave birth. As an older mother, coupled with my past serious illness, the process was indeed quite difficult. Robert and David waited outside the delivery room for half the night. It was a girl. A newborn baby was tiny, red and soft. I held her in my arms, looking at her peaceful sleeping face. A feeling of happiness welled up. Someone knocked on the hospital room door. A young man in a white shirt and gray sweater, wearing gold-rimmed glasses, was refined and handsome, radiating a clean and refreshing aura. He walked to the bedside, his gaze as calm as water, falling on the infant in my arms. Do you want to hold her? I asked with a smile. He hesitated. I knew he had severe, means germophobia/cleanliness obsession, and I was deliberately teasing him. Okay. I was surprised to see him take the baby. He held her so carefully, as if cradling a fragile treasure. Just then, David walked in. Dr. Ethan Clark. David recognized him and greeted him. Ethan Clark nodded. David was used to the other man's indifferent attitude. Ethan Clark was the younger Clark, and my psychologist. After I returned from abroad that year, although the surgery was successful, death felt like a sword hanging over my head. Wavering, trembling, both physically and mentally, I was in a state of extreme weakness. Born from death. I simultaneously recuperated my body and underwent psychological treatment. I first found a psychologist with high prestige in the field. He was about my father's age. Perhaps due to his seniority, he always had a hint of scrutiny, judgment, and lecturing. I felt like I was facing another Robert. Before Ethan Clark, I had seen several psychologists but couldn't open up. Given Robert's status and position, as his wife, privacy was very important. I didn't want the details of my marriage with him to appear in some gossip media's tabloid news. David recommended Ethan Clark to me. Ethan Clark came from a privileged background. By the time his family discovered his mother was abusing him due to postpartum depression, he had already shown signs of autism. The little boy was indifferent to the outside world, silent and uncommunicative. Later, after treatment, his condition improved, but his personality was set. He wasn't interested in inheriting the family business and went abroad to study psychology after graduation. I was very satisfied with Ethan Clark, a qualified garbage can. He quietly absorbed my negative emotions and acutely analyzed the problems between Robert and me. Incompatible worldviews, life views, and values. Irreconcilable conflicts. For the sake of mental health, he advised me to cut ties. It was a revelation. 12. Give me the child. David held out his hand, but Ethan Clark glanced at him and didn't let go. David, let Dr. Ethan Clark hold her. David gave me a strange look, keenly sensing something. Sadie, do I know this child's dad? He was practically asking if it was Ethan Clark. It wasn't surprising that he suspected. I had said the man was clean living, which both he and Robert scoffed at, but if it was Ethan Clark, it would fit. Girls often resemble their fathers. Although the baby was just born, her features faintly resembled Ethan Clark's. It's me, Ethan Clark said calmly. I nodded. It's him. David looked at him, looked at me, and finally at the baby in the swaddle, grinding his teeth somewhat. Shit, I hooked you two up, and I ended up doing the work for someone else. We're not together. It took me quite a bit of effort to persuade Ethan Clark back then. Originally, he was giving me psychological treatment, but I knew he had social anxiety and couldn't form intimate relationships with women. A healer cannot heal himself. He hadn't emerged from his childhood trauma either, unable to forget his mother's abuse when he was young. I'll give birth to this child, and we'll raise her together. In the process, you, as a parent, can try to raise yourself again. After meeting Ethan Clark, I was even more grateful that I hadn't given birth to that child back then. I wasn't sure if I would have resented it in that terrible psychological state. When mothers are emotionally unstable, young children are the most hurt. That child's brief appearance in this world seemed to be just to save me. So after recovering from my illness, I urgently wanted a child. I started to believe in fate, hoping she could come back to me. Of course, choosing Ethan Clark was partly for selfish reasons. Considering the worst-case scenario, if my cancer recurred, I trusted Ethan Clark and believed he would do his best to take care of this child. 13. Just as Ethan Clark placed the baby back in my arms, Robert walked in quickly. The child is his. Didn't you hear? I had seen him standing outside the door in my peripheral vision, hidden in the shadows. You have psychological treatment twice a week. So you two were sleeping together right under my nose all these 5 years? Is the child really IVF? Isn't it just a means to deceive me? Robert completely lost his composure. Before I could speak, he swung his fist and hit him. His knuckles hit Ethan's chin hard. Ethan Clark fell heavily to the ground. Robert. He stopped, looked up at me, his eyes were red-rimmed and glistening. I told you I cheated from the beginning, but you didn't believe me. Now you think I deliberately faked the hospital records to deceive you? Isn't that a little ridiculous? I'm not like you. I can't separate emotional and physical intimacy. The child is IVF, and Dr. Ethan Clark and I are just friends. I gently patted the baby in my arms who had been startled awake, my voice calm. Also, you said you could give me anything I want, so I want to ask you to disappear from my life from now on. Can you? We completely fell out in front of outsiders. Hearing my words, Robert's body trembled slightly. He lowered his head and turned around very slowly. Sadie, just calm down. We'll talk next time we meet. I expected Robert to continue harassing me, but unexpectedly, he suddenly agreed to the divorce soon after. His lawyer redrafted a divorce agreement. Property split equally. He would also transfer the shares I intended to give up to me in cash. It was a staggering amount. David's lawyer reviewed it, found no issues, and I signed it. We divorced quietly. Robert went overseas. Overnight, he disappeared from public view. 6 months later, Robert's company got a new CEO. David said he bought a large estate in Montana and seemed planning to settle down permanently. Hearing this news, I wasn't too surprised. In the past 6 months, I had received packages from him intermittently, filling an entire room. There were a lot of organic natural farm products. Why would someone as ambitious as him retreat from public life? Could it be that the divorce from you was too much of a blow? David asked, puzzled. Maybe he's sick. That's what outsiders are guessing too, but nobody has seen him. He doesn't attend any gatherings or events now. I responded with indifference. Ended the call. I put on the ruby earrings in front of the mirror. The pigeon's blood ruby necklace Robert gave me was too grand, and I didn't have occasions to wear it, so I asked the craftsman to turn it into earrings for me. No matter how expensive jewelry is, keeping it in a box, never seeing the light of day, is a real waste. The ruby earrings paired with a little black dress and simple red lipstick didn't need much else. My complexion looked radiant. On the sofa, Ethan Clark was holding the baby, who he had just coaxed to sleep, giving me a look I couldn't quite read. Going out? Yep, date. Divorced and with a child, I didn't shy away from starting a new chapter. Life is a combination of various experiences. I didn't want to lie on my deathbed, recalling my emotional life, only to find Robert had occupied almost all of it. After all, the experiences he gave me in the latter half were truly unpleasant. This was also advice from Ethan Clark, my psychologist. Love yourself, love others, try new things bravely, and build new intimate relationships with people. Dr. Ethan Clark, thank you for taking care of the child tonight. I waved at him with a smile. Tomorrow I'll drive, and we'll take the child to the beach. Ethan Clark dislikes crowded places, so our outings focus on natural scenery, playing with leaves and sand with the child. And the child recognized David as her godfather. He likes lively places and loves taking the child to shopping malls and amusement parks, praising his goddaughter's intelligence and beauty to everyone he met, gleefully. Their hobbies complemented each other quite well. 1 year later. Late at night, I received a call. Miss Cheen, I apologize for disturbing you so late, but Mr. E just passed away. I froze. Mr. E was diagnosed with Alzheimer's. Currently, there are no medical means to slow down the progression of his illness. His memory deteriorated too quickly and severely, and his periods of lucidity became shorter and shorter. I believe Mr. E must have briefly regained consciousness, so he shot himself in the study. The psychological impact was too great. I was in a daze. Mr. E made a will in advance. All his property was left to you. I have a small request. Is it convenient for you to travel overseas right now? Mr. E left behind an estate, and there are many things here he left for you and your child. I think it would be best for you to come and see before deciding whether to sell it. Okay, I'll book a flight tomorrow. I glanced at the baby sound asleep next to me, then turned my gaze to Ethan Clark. We started dating 3 months ago. I had never met a man I was attracted to. Either their appearance or personality wasn't right, or we couldn't connect with. Ethan Clark suddenly suggested we try. I refused without hesitation. He was too important to me. He was my psychologist and the child's caretaker. Irreplaceable. Breaking things off with him meant too much to lose. I didn't want to take that risk. But ultimately, I couldn't resist the temptation. On impulse, I slept with him. Felt like a long-awaited relief. I slept with him again. And then again. He was young, had good stamina, and was intelligent. He was attentive to my needs, willing to please me. We clicked more and more. I experienced a happiness I had never known before. So, during one of David's unannounced visits, when he walked in on us, I made it official with Ethan Clark. Forget it, dating isn't marriage. You can divorce even after marriage. At worst, I'll just keep trying to steal you away. David was very philosophical about it. This time, he flew over with us. After all, we've known each other for years. I should see him off. Although they had stopped speaking long ago, Robert's death was too sudden. A brilliant business genius's dramatic demise in such a way left him with a sense of regret. Mr. Smith, the assistant, picked us up at the airport. He had worked by Robert's side for many years and was considered his most trusted person. Robert didn't want a funeral. His ashes were to be sent back to his hometown after cremation. He had bought a burial plot years ago, right next to his parents. Although Robert had once given me an island, seeing the estate with my own eyes still astonished me with its scale. Orchards, farms, grasslands, horse ranches, and a vast blue lake. The estate was in the southern hemisphere. I could bring my daughter here when the northern hemisphere entered its bitter winter. The car drove all the way into the villa. Ethan Clark took my daughter to familiarize herself with the environment, and the assistant led me into Robert's study. David followed behind, and when he saw the photos that covered all 4 walls, he let out a swear word. The photos included his parents, and me. The pictures taken during our honeymoon trip were enlarged. He didn't have much money back then. We traveled on a budget. All our money went into plane tickets and accommodation. We mostly ate street food. I held a selfie stick in one hand and skewers in the other, chili oil on my lip, but he didn't mind, and kissed me, his eyes full of laughter. The camera clearly captured those moments from 10 years ago. I had already forgotten them. We were happy then. Mr. E's memory deteriorated too quickly and severely. This past year, he only remembered his parents and you, Miss Cheen. But Mr. E had instructed us never to contact you, no matter what. To soothe his agitated mood, we had no choice but to cover the walls with photos. He would stay here for an entire day. Mr. Smith, the assistant explained. So, during the last year of his life, he was surrounded by strangers he didn't recognize. And the people he remembered were not there. I suddenly recalled the last time I saw Robert. At that time, he must have already been diagnosed with the illness and preparing to go abroad for treatment. I was with my child, basking in the sun in the park. He suddenly appeared. He just stood there, quietly watching me, watching the child in the stroller. His eyes welled up. He turned away. "Sadie, goodbye. Goodbye," I replied coldly, as if to a stranger. "Mommy, hug." From a distance, hearing my daughter's soft call, I couldn't help but smile and turn around. Then, I held her close. The soft little person toddling towards me.